The Volari military headquarters were in a state of constant agitation. Each office, each communication post, even each corridor was filled with activity as the officers of each branch of the army were doing their best to prepare for the upcoming war. The neighboring Isle Empire had been amassing ships at their border for a few days, and everyone's fear had been confirmed this morning. The Empire demanded their vassalization within a week or they would impose their will by force. The Volari Republic was a democracy, and bowing down to a tyrant was out of the question. They immediately sent out a request for help to all factions that could possibly take their side, and all the most important Volari military leaders were waiting for the answers in the grand meeting hall of the army headquarters. Finally, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Diplomacy entered the room and started his speech. "I know you are all very short on time, so I will get straight to the point. Nobody will join this war on our side." The room exploded with disappointment, and some generals even stood up from their seats, ready to leave. The Volari didn't have a strong military nor the industry to mobilize and expand their fleet. They were a mostly agricultural country, and without outside help, they stood no chance. The minister kept on going. However, the amount of economic sanctions against the empire, as well as humanitarian help promised, was far higher than what we expected. "Excuse me, Minister, could you get to the point? What military help can we actually expect?" It was the head of defense who had just spoken. He clearly did not care for anything but substantial help from species who could actually provide it. Well, the cars, humans, and aides all promised significant military material donations as well as trainers to help with mobilization. The generals seemed a little relieved. Those were all prime military and industrial powers. If they really acted on those promises, then the Republic might have a chance. The humans also offered to send an Atis. "A what?" asked the head of defense. "An Atis? If I understood correctly, it's a kind of strategic advisor who will observe our tactics and help us improve them." A field marshal sighed. She thought that sounded more like an annoyance. "Why would we want human strategic insight anyway?" she asked. "Well, for starters, the humans have never lost a war." "Are you joking?" screamed an admiral. "Against the Daru, 4 or 5 years ago, they did not win a single battle." "Yes, but they did win the war." "How so?" "Well, I think I'll explain. Who knows, maybe some of us will be inspired by the way humans win wars. 5 decades ago, the Daru were the biggest exporters of luxury products and consumer goods in a 30 light-year radius. However, the rising humans were starting to get into that market too, and the Daru revenues were starting to take a dip. To make matters worse, the Daru had been the unofficial protectors of a trade station network called the RCU for nearly a century. Around this time, the RCU signed an official protectorate treaty with the humans. Safe to say, the Daru were furious. I think now is a good time to mention that the Daru and humans were nearly neighbors. Their territories were separated by a 300 light-year wide band of unclaimed space called the Great Way. The absence of borders made it ideal for trade, but also piracy, which is why the RCU was installed there and why they needed protection. When the Daru declared war, they had a marvelous fleet comprised of hundreds of heavy ships like dreadnoughts and carriers. The humans, on the other hand, only had a handful of these, most of them being prototypes. Anyway, the bulk of their navy was still made of light ships like corvettes, destroyers, or frigates. These kinds of ships had no chance against the Daru navy, and they indeed lost every single actual battle of the war. But that didn't matter. The human strategy was, for lack of a better word, insane. They placed a blockade on the Daru and enforced it with a fleet much weaker than their opponent. But for what? The Daru economy covered nearly everything and would not collapse without imports like many others would. But the humans only wanted to block their exports to force the customers to switch to their products. Even in war, they did not seek to invade their enemies, capture territories, and win battles. No, war was merely another way to reach the same goal as peace. Now, you're probably wondering why the Daru didn't use their superior navy to break the blockade. Well, their territory was gigantic. There were nearly 7,000 different systems trading ships would use to go from Daru territory to the Great Way. The Daru simply did not have enough ships to put one in each system. So most of the time, they would warp to a system, push the humans out, and move on to the next one. As soon as a trading ship tried to go through the supposedly liberated systems, the humans would come back and destroy it. To be able to put ships in every single system, the humans used everything they had, not hesitating to get decades-old designs out of their dust hangars to send them to the front line. They modified a mass-produced commercial cargo ship to turn it into a low-cost interceptor. It was the cheapest, ugliest piece of scrap the galaxy had ever seen, but it did not matter. What was important was that human dockyards could pump out 10 of those in a day without breaking a sweat. By the end of the war, they had at least 7 ships in every Daru border system. Then, every time an enemy ship entered their system, the humans would just flee without fighting. If necessary, they would engage in combat but only to buy time for others to escape. This is why they lost every battle. They weren't even trying to win. The Daru High Command quickly changed their strategy. Instead of trying to clear every system, they just kept their ships and a few of them to get the way open. However, the humans would just ambush the traders in the next system as soon as they entered the Great Way. In the end, the Daru were forced to deploy their fleet in dozens of systems to keep a single trade route open. There was worse, the humans began to arm pirates and offer them amnesty after the war on the condition that they attacked only Daru ships. This strategy strained the Daru resources even further and ensured the blockade stayed up. The worst part was that other routes to leave Daru territory existed, but they had just more border taxes to pay. The only effect of the blockade was a 30% to 50% increase in price on Daru products, but that was all the humans needed to convince customers to switch to them. Now, the best part is, from the point of view of the Daru, the real war hadn't even started. The blockade was more of an annoyance while they were preparing for a complete invasion of mankind. But as soon as their invasion fleet was about to cross the Great Way, the humans surrendered. That was very surprising to the Daru, but they gladly accepted this easy victory. Even at the negotiation table, the humans' cunning and deception continued to shine. They offered substantial war reparations if they could keep their protectorate over the RCU. The Daru diplomats, convinced that the humans valued the RCU greatly, decided to take it instead without reparations. This was exactly what the humans wanted. Of course, after the war, most people had switched to buying human products and did not switch back to the Daru. Defending the RCU network against pirates was costly and only really worth it if you had a lot of goods flowing through them. The Daru were left weakened, cut off from their main source of revenue with a boulder tied to their legs. The humans had secured control over a gigantic market while earning the respect of most pirates in the Great Way. This, my friends, is how humans win wars, not just through glorious battles and shining conquests, but through control of every single detail in every field with an overarching strategy encompassing everything. Most of the generals in the room were already discussing new strategies inspired by the human doctrine. The head of defense stood up, "Tell the humans to send their ATs. And let's hope they'll be as brilliant for us as they were against the Daru." The Volari capital was still in the same state of incredible agitation as when the ISIL ultimatum arrived 3 days ago. Everyone was bracing for the worst as it felt like each second passing was only making the disaster closer. But rather than silently accepting their fate, the Volari people were preparing with frenetic activity. Everyone, from the greatest generals to the most humble commoners, tried to do their best to help with the coming menace. The panic state of the city contrasted greatly with the silence of the Presidential Strategic Office, where most of the government and military commanders were gathered. The atmosphere was tense as the leaders of the Republic were waiting for a guest that would hopefully help them sort out the situation. Finally, the human envoy entered the room. She was relatively small and unimpressive for someone of her importance, and the black uniform of the Special Forces didn't really suit her well. She introduced herself as Commander Mora and claimed to be nothing more than a messenger for human high command. Some Volari generals looked like they already regretted wasting their precious time on this top-secret meeting. Regardless, Commander Mora started her briefing. "I will start with the immediate defense strategy we conceived since it needs to be addressed as soon as possible." A map of the Volari Republic appeared on the giant screen behind her. It was labeled with a priority of defending various systems as well as the projected deployment of troops. She went through them one by one, justifying each of her recommendations, explaining how the Republic could defend the essential systems for the longest time possible without wasting any ship. When she got to the last system, she ordered all troops to defend until they were defeated. A general stopped her. What do you mean until they are defeated? Why can't we retreat to the next system? Because there will be no next system. This is the capital. The enemy will have broken the backbone of your navy by this point, and they will be ready to march into the heart of your country. So, unfortunately, our priority at that point will not be to protect Volari lives anymore. So what is the priority? To make the enemy pay the greatest price possible for every inch of your country. Your navy will die protecting the capital, and its survivors will regroup into guerrilla fleets to target vulnerable supply chains and trade routes of the empire. The head of defense finally raised his voice. Excuse me, but how is that a defense strategy? I asked for a way to save this country, not for a way to lose it. I'm sorry, but the Republic will lose this war. The whole room stayed silent for a moment. Everyone was either shocked, disappointed, or mad. But they had nothing to say because deep down, they knew that their situation was hopeless. As things stand now, the Republic has no way of surviving the Isle Empire, and I have no doubt that their invasion will be swift and deadly. One officer from the Air Force could not stay silent. So why did you even come? To tell us we're doomed to our faces and leave? No, I came here to help you win. Excuse me? I thought you just said we would lose the war no matter what. Yes, you will lose the war. But I intend to make sure you win the peace.